quickly in a minute or two say like, okay, if you had to choose, what would you choose? Actually, while I'm thinking only, I'm realizing this is a bad idea.
Yeah, I was just going to say like below, I will say MYP and then Viren will say MYP, then they'll be like, why are you introducing IGC?
So we're going to be comparing IB and IGCSE. And just to clarify, we're going to compare the 10th and the 12th grade level of IB. And respectively, we have the IGCSE 10th grade and we have the AS and A levels in 11th and 12th grade. So we are going to be comparing these. Actually, before this, I just want to introduce everyone. So just say hi. We have four of us sitting in this room. Right across me, we have Viren, who's our IBDP coordinator. You're next.
Hi, Parmeet. Hello, everyone.
We have Priya right across, who has been doing college counseling for a long time now at Next.
Hi, Parmeet.
And we have Radhika, who's our head of school.
Hi.
The one thing that became clear is that there is no easy, simple answer to this, obviously. And you will see why as we take you through everything. It kind of depends a lot on the child. It depends a lot on their particular, preferences, aptitude, etc. So one way to simplify it, or one sort of template of framework to utilize when we're looking at this whole issue, what we thought was in terms of certain particular factors and certain profiles. All right. So what I mean by that is, there are certain attributes of factors where it's very clear how what is different. One thing was very clear is that IB is much more conceptual. It requires thinking, requires analyzing. IB is a lot more writing focused. Everything you do in IB will require a lot of writing, and there are kids who struggle with that. IB will always have more workload. Whatever subject you take, there are, because it's not just an exam. There are always assignments. There are always, internal IA. What's the full form of IA?
Internal
Assessment, internal assessments, assignments, a lot of things. And I mean, I guess it's a little bit subjective, but for me, it's very clear that, IB will be more fun, in the sense that even the content, even the exams, everything is more fun, everything is more engaging. And at the same time, in IGCSE, you get much more subject choices.
70 subjects when it comes to grade 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
IGCSE has more than 70 subjects, so yeah, there is crazy amounts of subject choice. That's where IGCSE wins. And then another way to think about it is in terms of profiles. Actually, before I get into that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the number of subjects that you need to take. So what we understand is that in MYP, there are 7 different subjects that you have to take, right?
Yes.
So we have math, we have English, we have a second language, we have science, we have humanities, and then we have an IDU. What exactly is?
Interdisciplinary unit.
So they'll release.
It's basically an interdisciplinary unit between two subjects that you study.
Right. So we have one interdisciplinary unit and we also have a portfolio subject. So you end up having to take 7 subjects and you can't really skip any of this.
No.
So if you don't like math or if you don't like, science.
That's not an option in MYP.
Yeah. So there's no such option in MYP. Whereas in IGCSE, you get your certificate as long as you do 5 subjects.
Yes.
And the only mandatory one is English.
English. That too, it's probably in India that we have mandated sort of English.
Okay.
But yeah, there are options where you don't even have to do English as first language. You can do it as a second language. So it's permutation combination.
Great. So that's also something important to note. So, in case you want to skip certain subjects, that's just not possible in MYP. And IGCSE lets you skip quite a few subjects.
And again, we have IBPP as a component, which you can't skip in MYP, which is
Okay.
IB personal project.
Right.
And service also as one of the components where there are certain requirements to be met.
Right. Great. So already you can see, when it comes to sort of the workload, it's always more in IB, and yeah, this is what it looks like. A lot of flexibility in IGCSE.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, the second way that we wanted to sort of think through this whole thing was in terms of profiles. And when we mean profiles, we mean like the profile of the student. This was a quick synopsis of all our discussions that we've had till now in terms of the profiles. That, yeah, if you want to select an easier path, IGCSE is probably a better option. If you want a good challenge, you might want to pick IB. If you hate writing, you want to pick IGCSE because IB requires a lot of writing. And then we have this science thing. So if you're very science focused, like, suppose you want to be a doctor or even an engineer in certain cases, you want to pick IGCSE because in IB, you can only take 2 sciences, or if you take a third science, you're going to have to take an extra subject. Because IGCSE is very flexible, any 5 subjects, even similarly with A level, any, whatever, 3-4 subjects, you can take physics, chemistry, biology, So that's where this particular point is coming from. IGCSE is much more structured and predictable. And even the whole curriculum, the textbooks, all of that. And this for us it's not just a profile of student, but it's also a profile for the parent, where if the parent wants the curriculum to be very structured, very predictable, like, that's something that you can do at home by yourself, IGCSE is going to be much more conducive to that. IB will be too much for a parent to figure out how to do.
We also realize that language proficiency needs to be way higher when you do. That's something we've seen as a pattern when you're doing the IB program.
Even in trying to understand the question in a exam paper,
Yes.
you need to be able to have your language skills at a particular level with IB. Otherwise, you won't understand the question only. Forget about then having to write a lot. When it comes to it being more fun and it having less exam stress. I don't know why I put it as one point, but in both of those things, IB, you'll see is, much better. It's much more fun. Like many of the IB exams, when you look at them, like at least when I look at them, for me, it's like, man, I would love to give this exam. Like it looks fun. Like it looks like, but you look at IGCSE and it feels like that traditional exam ki nahi,
Very
little boring.
structured.
Yeah.
पढ़ के जाना
पढ़ के जाना पड़ेगा, हाँ.
Right. Now we want to talk a little bit about, what you want from your future prospects, right? Now it's not going to be very easy to answer these questions, but, we'll just discuss them and then we'll revisit it at the end of the whole discussion. So if I want to do engineering or medical or architecture in India, and these 3 things come together because all of them have an entrance exam, right? What would be better for me if I was to ask you, Priya?
I would say IGCSE and A levels at that time, because in India, if I want to do an engineering, requirement is 4 subjects, like your physics, chemistry, math, or a technical subject, and a language. Similarly, for architecture, you just need to do the 3 subjects that's required, which is PCM.
M.
So which is physics, chemistry, math. So, and then you can focus again on your portfolio building and work on the entrance exam, because sketches and in studio exams are also very, very important in architecture. And then even for medical, they need 4 subjects, which can be physics, chemistry, bio, or math.
And math.
And math and 1 language. So it's 4 in total. So 3 of the sciences and math. And you just need to pass your A levels. There's no requirement which says that you have to get 90% or 3 A stars or something like that. Similarly for law as well, you can take any subject and get a 45% in the equivalence conversion that you have as per AIU, and then you can it helps you. So A levels in general gives you a lot of time to study for your entrance exam and work on the portfolio that you have, in comparison to DP, because academically requirement workload wise is way too much in DP. So in India, I would say yes, let's look at A levels in comparison to IBDP because the workload for Indian entrance exam is way higher than what you need in the others. So yeah.
Right. So I have a bit of a different view on this, or like at least a different angle that we could take, right? So now, if you want to do, say, engineering, medical, science focused stuff, yes, what you're saying is IGCSE requires you to take fewer subjects. My argument sort of against that is that the science subject in IGCSE are very challenging, are much more challenging than actually the IBDP, which is what we'll see a little later. So it almost becomes that you're picking, and now if your objective, as you mentioned, if you're doing this entrance exam, you only need to get your 60%, and then that's all that matters. You don't need to actually score well.
Yeah.
You need to focus much more on scoring well in your entrance exam, right? While the IB workload will be more, I feel the exam stress in IB will be way, way less. And I'm a IBDP student myself, and I remember like at that time when I was giving my final exam, I was already in college. So in a similar situation where there was not too much at stake, and it was such a breeze for me. Like because IB doesn't. It's more all the work that you've done in the last 2 years, all the skills and concepts and stuff that you've understood. You just have to apply them. You don't have to stress too much of the exam. You don't have to prepare like crazy for the exam. I really don't like sitting and studying too much. That is my problem. So in that sense, I feel maybe I would have picked IB. So that's where the interesting thing is where it turns out that while IGCSE, like the IGCSE science subjects are quite intense compared to the IBDP science subjects. The IBDP science subjects, if you are doing engineering, medical, will be a breeze. You will barely have to prepare or stress about the exam as such. You will have to do much more work through your 2 years. So, and Viren, any thoughts on that? Would the content of, say, your A levels kind of overlap with engineering entrance exams or medical entrance exams?
I would say A level is a little more in line with how I would prepare for an entrance exam as compared to IBDP,
Okay. And if I want to do, say, liberal arts, in India, like now we have a lot of new universities, that are offering liberal arts in India, what would make more sense?
I mean, at that point, I would say let's look at IBDP because it gives you a holistic picture, and the requirement in liberal arts college in India is very similar to what American liberal arts colleges require you in terms of skill set, in terms of thinking, in terms of writing. And I think the IB prepares you with that kind of rigor. Your EE, your TOK, your IAs, all that help you with the kind of critical thinking, writing that your liberal arts college requires you. I know somebody who's done IBDP and went to a liberal arts college. The first year of college was a breeze. They had a lot of fun and they could explore and do other things. So I would recommend doing IBDP at that point.
Liberal arts in India now, you're saying that it's very similar to the US, and I can relate a lot to that. And and we know that the same thing applies now, honestly, to the US. And it's pretty clear to me why. Because in IB, like, you don't have textbooks.
Yeah.
You have to evaluate so many different sources. You have to apply your mind as to, how the sources are biased. You have to do some critical thinking. And then whatever you are putting down is your own synthesis of everything, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what exactly happens in all liberal arts colleges.
And yeah, you'd somewhere bring in your interdisciplinary learning to put all your thoughts together as well, which is what is expected in your liberal arts studying as well, right? You end up doing a science and you end up doing a humanities-based subject or something very, very different,
Right.
philosophy-based subject.
So definitely, it's a lot about critical thinking, analyzing, coming up with your own things, not just copy pasting stuff.
Exactly.
So all of that. And secondly, the writing element, there's the writing element that sort of like, a lot of people complain about. It's actually what, if you're going to do liberal arts, it's going to be involved, and there's going to be a lot of writing. So IB is definitely preparing you for that. So yeah, so I think definitely. And the only thing to add, I guess, Priya, in terms of the US is that the US considers the DP a much more rigorous program, which of course it is. and that is why they like that academic rigor. So they give a little bit of preference to the IBDP program.
Yeah, and like if I do an A levels and I want to go to the US, I'm expected to do way more. I'm expected to do APs as well, and the
Right.
expectation of APs does not come in when I do an IBDP as much as it comes in when I do an A levels.
Right. Yeah.
US especially.
Right. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. And then we were talking about the UK, and I think what would you say with the UK if I wanted to?
I mean, in the UK, they don't really have any preference as such, which says you have to do an IBDP or an A levels. They do an equivalence conversion in terms of tariff points. UK has tariff points depending on the subjects that are prerequisites that they have. But what I've understood and what I've seen is A levels tariff point conversion requirement is way lesser than what IBDP is. So if I want to go to the UK, I would prefer doing an A levels because my A levels conversion tariff points is comparatively lesser than an IBDP. I know, but having said that, there is no preference that IBDP is given or.
Okay, great. And I think just the one last thing to touch upon, like in terms of the quality of the curriculum, in terms of your, what you get out of it, because like the one thing is because IB is very skill based and, sort of concept based, you're likely to sort of, I mean, it's better overall as a curriculum. You're likely to, carry those things forward, in the future, especially when it comes to writing, because ultimately after you do all of this in 10, whatever, probably a few years, you're going to forget all the content you had learned anyway. But the skills remain, some of these conceptual things remain, and that's what IB is really good at. So, while we analyze the whole thing, the quality of the actual curriculum, I guess, that's where there is an advantage with the IB. And I think now, we'll just sort of maybe go around the table and like quickly in a minute or two say like, okay, if you had to choose, what would you choose? Actually, while I'm thinking only, I'm realizing this is a bad idea.
Yeah. Say like below, I will say MYP and then Viren will say MYP. Then they'll be like, why are you introducing IGCSE?
Oh, but you were going to say MYP.
Like if you ask me, right?
Yeah.
Like as an individual,
Yeah.
what would I choose? I would like doing this because I never like doing textbook studying and.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
The one thing that throws me off majorly though is like we want academics only to be such as small a piece as possible, right?
Yeah.
So while I definitely like IB more than IGCSE,
That's my point.
where I'm very
Yeah.
torn.
Yeah, same exactly.
That's
Like,
my
if you-
point. Like I'll do an IGCSE just to tick that box.
Right.
I don't need
That
to
you
put in
did.
too much of effort
Yeah.
and all of that, and I'll get done with it. I have so many way more interesting things to figure, and I have the time to do that sort of stuff.
Right.
In
got
MYP, I have to spend a lot of time writing, thinking, analyzing. Still, it might be a revolution only that I have to look at and write. I'm
Right.
interested in that.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. And so yours is you
So for me,
kind of voted for IB.
yeah, I would prefer an MYPs because I know that I don't have to read a textbook. I can read everything that's around and I can use all the information, the skills that I know of and apply it. I don't have to stress about one day before the exam study. And I feel like with MYP, I still feel that I can do a lot more things. Like it gives me avenues to do it because ultimately when I look at the paper, it's my skills that I have to work on. If I do whatever the teacher's teaching me in class, if I focus on it, I'm done. Like, I don't have to go
Right.
back, do my own studying and then come back to the exam saying, oh shit, I have to prepare for 5 years.
Sure. And Viren?
For me, in terms of personal growth, if I think, definitely IB.
Correct.
But if I just want to get a good number
Yeah.
and do something side by side, no doubt, no brainer for me. It's IGCSE.
Right, sure. Yeah, I'm also very confused, like, because I really love the IB, writing is not such a challenge for me. So I can just sort of, and then basically all that stress and pressure is not there so much is my feeling,
Yeah.
like, or even when you're preparing for the exam, it's more fun because you're doing more practice. You're not sitting and memorizing things and, so if you ask me now, I don't know the IGCSE too well. If you ask me if it was between ICSE and IB, absolutely no question it would be IB. Because my problem is I hate memorization too much. I hate exam pressure too much.
Same.
So those two things if you can get it out of the way, I'm willing to put in 50% more work, no problem, but get this, because all that is just useless, annoying effort, so I don't know. I'm sort of very torn because like I think the quality of the experience will be way better for me in IB, but I know there is going to be that maybe 20, 30 or even 50% more effort.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want my quality to be great. I don't want my effort to be more. But if you tell me that, okay, put 30% less effort, but it's all memorization and it's all, that's not the case with IGCSE. I'm more ICSE. I'll be like, no, fine. I put double the effort to not have that, night before the exam, staying up, just coffee after coffee, trying to memorize everything. Like that is just the worst. So,
Exactly. That was my thought as well when you asked me that. I just remember in grade 10, my physics exam.
Right.
I did not understand anything, but I had to memorize and go for the paper.
Right.
It's way more harder than if you ask me, you teach me an app in an application way where I just have to not memorize anything, just know the concept. Be prepared. You're prepared for the exam if you've understood the concept, right? Like, you don't have to
Yeah,
come
right.
worry about it. Like,
And I think that where it's tricky though is like at least when we were evaluating the IGCSE thing, IGCSE is very different from ICSE.
Very,
So there
yeah.
not that much memorization and all involved. So that's where I'm a bit confused, that okay, is it so bad? But yeah, if at all there was like a big element of that, I would be too turned off by it, So that's kind of my take on it. Yeah, so we have Vidya here, and the first subject we're gonna do a deep dive on is English. And yeah, we'll now dive into straight the exam paper. So so here now we are looking at the IGCSE 10th grade exam. And we have this whole prompt where you have to read this text and then you have to answer certain questions. So unusual modes of transport, and there are some tricycles and different parts of the world, having different modes of transport. Question number 1: give 3 ways to travel that we might find more interesting according to the text. So I mean, here you can see, practically a copy paste kind of a,
Yeah, it's more direct questions
Yeah.
where the students depict basic comprehension of the text that they
Right.
read. So a lot of identify what, when, where kind of questions.
So just scrolling down, from whatever I am reading, it's still on that level of, okay, of course, yeah, here you have to think a little bit, like why are these things unusual or how are you going to sort of put that down? Now give 2 different reasons why Coco Taxi might appeal to tourists. I'm guessing this would be pretty obvious from the text itself, and yeah, like so a mixture, but as long as you've understood what you have read, I guess pretty much, we are able to easily answer these questions.
There further below, with
Okay.
the next question, you see that they're asking you to summarize.
Okay.
So that's a necessary skill that kids will need
Okay.
to apply in their real world. So
Okay.
identifying key points and then, how do you make it a more precise, compact
Okay.
communication.
I see.
This becomes something that can be it's a learned skill and it is challenging, especially when they give you a word limit like 120 words in
Right.
which you have to encapsulate the key ideas that they're asking you to look at.
Right.
So but this still becomes something that is application based. I wouldn't say that there's no critical thinking, because to summarize you do need to think critically,
Right.
because you have to identify what the key points are.
Explain how the writer uses language to convey meaning and create effect in these paragraphs. To choose 3 examples of words from each paragraph to support your answer. I see. Right. Interesting. Right. So I guess these were some of the questions where you have to apply more of your mind. But yeah, while I'm reading this, I still feel like, okay, it's not so open-ended. Like with each of these things, you have to figure out, what effect is being created or whatever, and give a few examples, which are again right there in your text.
And they also specify which paragraphs to look at. So
Oh, wow.
it's rather than the entire text. For
Right.
instance, they're asking you to look at paragraphs 8.
Oh,
to 10.
right. Correct. Right. Right.
There is
Okay.
that definition to what the question is asking you to do.
Right. Yeah. Sure. And now we will turn to the IB. All right. So this is the MYP 10th grade, paper. Again, we have like an excerpt.
So this is an excerpt from a literary work.
Okay. And just by reading this already, I feel a little bit like, there is a lot of, feelings and, abstract things that are there in the text. So I can already feel like, okay, something around that might be coming. And yeah, now to go to the questions, first question, comment on the use of setting as a device to create atmosphere in this extract. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like this is not really asking you directly anything about the text. Obviously, it's related to what's written in the text, but it's asking you a lot about how you feel or what you're thinking when you're reading it, or how would you sort of put it?
So the questions are analytical in nature. They evaluate your ability to analyze literature.
Right.
So when we are looking at literary terms like tone, mood, atmosphere, setting,
Right.
these are elements that the student needs to understand.
Yeah. So I know that when Radhika rewrite these questions, she was like, I'm never going to do.
I don't want to do an MYP English for sure.
But I feel, see, because you're kind of thrown off by these things like setting and atmosphere and all of that. But that's actually not so complicated, So for me, it's like, it'll take you a couple of days to understand what really sort of it means.
Fair.
So, but the thing is, you're gonna have to think a lot. So, like, basically, when I am looking at, these things, it's like, okay, I might have read the whole thing. I will have to read it again. Like, the moment I have this question, because I have to now think from that angle that, oh, okay, what is the setting and what is the atmosphere and how am I feeling about it and what, if, response is it evoking? And then I have to capture all of that and put it down on the paper.
The difference might be you are getting into the world of a creator
Right.
and
Yes.
trying to figure out what that
Yeah,
means.
so that's what is really cool. Like, it actually, because it pushes you out of that mode of just reading it and pushes you into more of the guy who wrote it, or the guy who made it. And it's like, why did he do it that way? And for the way he did it, what does it make you feel? So that becomes really interesting and obviously crazy challenging in a way. And the cool thing though is that, it's not that you need to, like, if you've done it enough times, you don't need to memorize. You don't need to know like too many things going into the exam, So, but of course, like compared to the IGCSE thing, yeah, like it's definitely a different ball game. And now I think let's quickly jump to DP and A levels and have a look at what that looks like.
To write an email to the company.
Okay,
And
got it.
That's a 10 marker. And then the second part is where you have to compare your email with this article. So there's an evaluation exercise over here.
Okay.
So-
So write an email and then compare your email. So this one is where it's a little bit interesting. Analyze the form, structure, and language of your email compared to the newspaper article. All right. I think let's have a look at the next one. Again, form, structure, and language. So is it that there is these, few types of questions that they're going to ask, and then that's kind of what you have to prepare for, like,
Yes.
Okay.
So the papers typically follow the same pattern.
Okay. More predictable as to how you're going to have to approach it. And now looking at the DP English
This is paper 1.
paper 1. Okay. And yeah, here again we have like some kind of an
So they'll
article.
give you 2 unseen texts.
Okay.
So it could be any text type.
Okay. Got it.
So it could be from infographics, which we had this year. It could be a website. It could be an advertisement, a political cartoon. So there are some 15, 20 plus text types that you could
Right.
the view.
How do text and image work together? Wow. Okay. To shape meaning in this comic. Wow.
So you do not see such texts in the S level or A levels.
Right. Sure.
So
Yeah.
we do have multimodal texts that do come in the
Right, yeah. And somewhere it feels like every time I read an IB question, it's totally different. It's not like it's predictable. It's not like it's using the same terms also, like form, structure, or whatever. All right. So now we have Adu who's going to take us through math. We are now looking at what exactly, Adu? E-assessment?
Yeah, we are looking at the E-assessment, the MYP E-assessment, and this is the image for the question that is provided. Yeah, so if you look at this question, it says design a floor layout of a basketball court inside the given piece of land, and they've given you multiple factors that you have to consider while designing the floor layout, like identifying the relevant factors, determining the maximum number of courts, and so on. In
Right.
IGCSE, they would probably just tell you this is the area you have, how many basketball courts could you fit into this?
Right.
And then your answer would be like 4 or 3.
Yeah.
You would never have to actually draw out the area. This
Right, yeah. And it's pretty crazy. I mean, it almost
Yeah.
feels like this is architecture, design kind of a question, not so much math.
Math,
But
yeah.
then
Yeah.
I guess that's how broadly IB is thinking of math.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and this is really interesting because I think it kind of captures a lot of things we've been talking about before.
Yes.
One is that, IB was always going to push you to think in different ways, and it's not typical, it's not predictable.
Yeah.
And second, the fun factor, like
Yeah.
basically, you're sitting and making basketball courts. in your
Yeah,
exam.
absolutely. Like, I mean, honestly, you can even go and maybe give this paper without knowing anything by just logic. You'll see that you have this much space,
Right.
and like you just have to put things in that much space.
Yeah, and that actually, also touches on the third point that I keep trying to make, which is like the exam stress is much less in IB,
Yes.
because like you can sort of go in not so prepared. If you are if you've kind of been practicing, have some of the skills, you'll be fine. It's
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
because how are you going to prepare for this?
Exactly. You can't really prepare for. So this is like a cumulative frequency question. So you also have questions in MYP where you have to just find values and remember certain things about graphs and all of that. So this is one of those questions.
Right.
But at the end of this question, so if you look at the question over here, it says compare the distribution of the salaries of mathematics graduates with archaeology graduates. So they're taking the statistical calculations that you've done.
Right.
Then they are saying that talk about who gets paid more, who gets paid less, depending on the statistics.
Okay.
Which is not something an IGCSE would ask. It would stop at, draw the diagram and that's it. Like, do not bother analyzing it further. So
Right.
the analysis part of it also is done in MYP, which is not done in IGCSE.
Now we are looking at the IGCSE paper.
Yes.
Very similar graph to what we saw
Yes.
before. Right.
Similar question.
Right.
But if you look at the questions that are asked about this, it will just be calculate the median age or the lower quartile and just write a value.
Right.
It's no longer compare something. So even if you go on further, you'll see you have to draw a box plot, but then it ends over there.
Right.
There's no conclusion you're making depending on the statistics that you've done before,
Right.
which is something you would have to do in an MYP paper. They will always ask you to analyze what you've done in like what you've calculated.
Right.
So that's something IGCSE never asks you to do. You just need to know how to do the calculations.
Right.
So if you look at an math AHL paper in DP,
Yeah.
you will be straight up have to apply the concepts that you've learned in class.
Right.
It's not like you are analyzing a scenario. It's basically just pure calculation and finding the value.
Right.
So a DP AHL math paper is very similar to an IGCSE paper or an A-level paper. It's not that different, and it is of the same level as an A-level paper approximately. It's of a high, like this is the hardest math in DP according to
Right. Right.
that is of the same level as an A-level math paper would be.
Right. Yeah.
The questions would also be similar. It'll just be like proving things and calculating values and
Okay.
it's not analyzing what calculations you're doing. Like
Right. Sure.
you
Sure.
just like do this.
Right. Right. Now we are looking at physics. We'll start with the MYP and then we'll move to IGCSE. Okay. What are we looking at here, Viren?
So what you see here is an example of a recent MYP 5 in-school assessment which we had conducted. You will see here in the video as you go along.
Right. I'll just play the video.
Yeah. There are some questions here. This is a circuit diagram.
Okay.
The speciality is that here there is a live simulation here where I can get the resistor out, I can get the battery out, the potential meter wire, and you will see a voltmeter also on the right hand side. So it's like kids are interacting live during the paper,
Right.
which is much more fun, interacting and engaging.
Right.
And it's in a way for learner it's easier to make connections when you see something happening and when you are trying something by yourself,
Right.
which is of
Sure.
course in line with this IB philosophy of you learn by inquiry and then reflection and so on. I'll not
Right.
get into the philosophy part, but yeah.
Right.
And
Fair.
this element is completely missing if you look at an IGCSE paper.
Right. Sure.
So you don't see the first page, you will
Right.
not be able to identify if it's an IBDP paper or an A-level paper or an IGCSE paper.
Okay. Right. Right.
Because it's
Sure.
that structured,
Right.
which is in a way rigid also.
Right.
There is nothing which you can interact with here.
Right.
know?
Sure.
And one more, if I have to be specific, one more component which is missing here is when you make a comparison with IB is that in IB, along with physics, you get some math equations also,
Right.
because they are promoting that we don't want learners to memorize any equation. It
Yeah.
has to be application based,
Right.
which may not be the case in IGCSE. They may
Okay.
not provide you all the equations. It's
Okay.
clearly written when you check the IGCSE website also that equations you are expected to remember them,
Okay.
and those equations which you are not expected to remember will be provided within the question.
Okay.
Many places where they say recall this equation, recall this concept when you're attempting the question.
Okay.
Whereas when you look at a physics IB guide,
Right.
I don't remember recall word
Right.
as such anywhere in the guide.
Right.
Because
Sure.
it's completely application based.
Right.
It's like we have given you everything starting from the constants to the math equations to the physics equations.
Right.
But that's not the case whether you look at A level or I.
What we're saying is that MYP does not require you to say memorize too much or
Yeah.
have too much content knowledge, right?
Yes.
So obviously it becomes easier. It becomes more fun, and as we saw, you're building things and
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah.
I guess safe to conclude that IGCSE 10th grade physics will be tougher.
Yes, content wise,
Yeah.
remembering concepts wise, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
can
more effort, more preparation, more content, more memorization, So that was a bit of a surprise when I first learned that. And I think it is going to be for everyone who sees it, because
Yeah. Yeah.
with everywhere you expect IB to have more rigor, which it does, but in a different way.
Yeah. IB is fun in the sense that you don't have to take that exam pressure as
Right. Yeah.
YB
Yeah.
also similar is the case.
Right. Absolutely.
If you're preparing well,
Yeah.
you don't have to worry too much about the content.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
like, are you able to figure out, have you developed those skills?
Right.
And it's a doable.
Right. And now, what if we compare the IBDP paper
Yeah.
to the A-level paper?
Question paper pattern and all is pretty similar.
It is similar.
Pretty
Okay.
similar.
Okay. But I guess the difficulty level in IGCS in A levels is more.
Again, it's because of number of topics and depth also. They are
Right.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
definitely
more number of
content-wise-
papers, more number of topics, more difficulty
Yeah.
is what we're seeing with the A levels. Let's have a look at an A level paper. And yeah, here you have some of these values and all already.
Yeah. So this, if you compare, so just that first page of
Yeah.
formula sheet and constant value.
Right.
Whereas if you look at IBDP physics, they have a formula booklet
Booklet,
separately
yeah,
somewhere
right,
around
right,
14 pages.
Right.
With all math equations also involved.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
means you don't need to memorize anything.
Right.
So they have given as simple as like I think volume of a sphere equation.
Yeah, that's
Like
also
data
there.
booklet. Yeah. Which is not the case here. So if you just pay attention to Indian universities and some of the entrance exams, this you may find a little smoother in terms of if you want to prepare for those exams.
Right.
Because that's what you're doing here.
Yeah. This is interesting. The first two questions I'm seeing on the IGCSE paper are hardcore content. Like basically, I cannot answer them.
Listen until you remember what it is.
Yeah, unless you know exactly what's there in the textbook or
Yeah.
So I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, math, it seemed like levels were similar. And yeah, यहाँ पे clearly I feel like the level is different.
So,
Difficulty is higher with
the stark
A levels.
difference here in compared to MYP and IGCSE and A level and DP HL level number of teaching expected hours is 240 and
Okay.
A level is 360.
Oh yeah.
Straight
Okay.
50% more.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
so you can imagine how the number of concepts they want you to cover.
Right. Right. Very interesting, man.
What you've opened right now is the art making forms for DP.
Okay.
Okay, so why we are starting with this is because DP is very clear about if you are in a higher level kid or if you're a standard level kid, you
Okay.
have to use these mediums from these columns. If you're not doing it, you're not getting the grade that you would probably want. Research in A levels is very, very different, vastly different from how research happens in IBDP. Because
Right.
how it happens in IBDP is you select your theme,
Right.
you have to do in-depth research on the work of 3 artists who have probably lived and died many
Right.
years ago.
Right.
Take 3 pieces of artwork, you're doing a function and purpose, you're doing a cultural context, and that's just a lot of writing.
Oh, okay.
When it comes to research in A levels, all your research is limited to a theme that you select.
Okay.
So now, say for example, if you are selecting a theme, say for example, technology or
Yeah.
like technology and art.
Okay.
All the research that you are going to do is going to be limited to the immediate style of art that you're using at the moment.
Right.
Say for example, now I have done all my work right now in pen.
Right.
Like I've done all the artwork that I want to do in pen. I'm like, okay, let me try out acrylic. Let me try
Okay.
out acrylic painting. So I'll probably look at the work of a few other artists. I don't have to look at function and purpose. I don't have to look at cultural context. I just need to understand their style and try and mimic
Okay.
that in your artwork. And all. Criteria A is research from a very art curator point of view for me to put it across in
Yeah.
in a simpler terms, because you should be able to look at an artwork and say this symbol used here has been used by this artist multiple times in different
Okay.
you don't have to do that much research
in
IGCSE. All the research that you're doing is restricted to the medium that you're using immediately
Right.
and the artist's artwork that you're looking at immediately.
Right. And okay, so we had plans to go through a lot of subjects, but I think it's not really needed, and it'll get too boring. So, what this was, these are all the discussions we've had internally. Actually,
Yes.
we went through English and physics. We didn't do chemistry and bio,
Yeah.
but that would be quite similar to what we saw in physics.
Physics, that's right.
Then when it comes to humanities and business, again, it's very similar to what we saw in English, which is that IB, focuses a lot on analyzing things.
Absolutely. You don't have to memorize any
Right.
content and come for a exam.
Right. Actually, that's an interesting thing. Like, so I'm not sure if we explored that. So, like, for example, history in an IGCSE, I'm guessing there will be a lot of memorization involved, right?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. So, while so there is more memorization, and there isn't this. With IB, just like how we saw in English, it's about like thinking from the author's perspective. It's about analyzing. It's about pushing your mind, like looking at from different perspectives. That's what is going to happen a lot in humanities, in business. Going back to the profiles, what we said was if you really want to take an easier path, like you don't want to study too much, you don't want to be stressed, academically, you would choose IGCSE. But of course, now this is a bit nuanced. So why we think that IGCSE and A levels would be an easier path is number one, because of lesser subjects and more liberal subject choices. You can
Yeah, a lot
drop
of choices.
certain
Yes.
drop certain subjects if you want. Second, lesser workload. So not as many internal assessments, not as many assignments and things like that, which we see in IB.
Yes.
Uh,
More
these are-
structured and direct.
Right. Yeah. And more structured and direct. So it's like, as we saw with the English, it's like, yeah, as long as you can read and understand what's written, you kind of have to copy paste most of the answers. You don't need to think too much and have that kind of a stress. At the same time, I think this is a bit with a bit of a caveat that only if you don't choose science, right? So your easier path would involve taking, English you have to taking more humanities subjects, taking, other subjects,
Yes.
and avoiding maybe math and science, because the math and science in IGCSE is more challenging
That's right.
than IBDP. So that's kind of why we are saying, this could be an easier path if created in the right way.
True.
Then, if we look at conceptual thinking, so if you are a conceptual thinker, if you like analyzing, if you enjoy those things, and at the same time, you don't like memorizing, right? Then again, it's IB for you. If you hate writing, and or if you're struggling with language,
Yes.
IB is not for you. There's
Definitely.
a lot of writing involved, and with even
Across subjects, that's the
Right.
whole thing. Whether it's PHE
Yeah.
or whether it's English or whether it's math.
right,
It's
or
right.
whether it's science.
Yeah.
So like basically, I was a physics, chemistry, high level, in IBDP, and yeah, we had to write so many lab reports. I think every other week we had to
Yes.
write a lab report. And it's a lot of writing. So it's not just science, it's a lot of writing. And, many times there are certain profiles that struggle with that.
True.
The science, this is an easy one where,
Yeah.
it's like you can take physics, chemistry, and biology and math, and LL,
Yeah.
basically in your A levels. So you've taken, all three sciences and math, and you have only still taken 5 subjects. If you try to do that in IB, you will have to take 7 subjects.
That's right. If you have to do 3 sciences, you have an extra subject.
Right. And yeah, as we saw with IGCSE, we only saw the exam papers, which are structured and predictable. What we didn't see also are sort of the textbooks, right? So, any thoughts on that? Like, I mean, I guess with IGCSE, is there like a prescribed textbook for each subject that comes
There
from
are
IGCSE?
textbooks, of course, like in IB, we say they're all reference books, like you use them.
Right.
It's only recommended.
Yeah.
But here you have different publication, but proper textbooks, which helps you get into this exam mode, sort of.
Right. And those, I mean, and that textbook will have like questions at the
Yes,
back
it
and,
does,
the
it does,
answers
it
at the
does.
back.
Yeah, I remember in math we had those practice, and there's one whole page called review questions. So if you do those about 50 questions, that whole chapter is like how we used to do typically practice.
Right.
Drill, more drill. sort of.
Right. Yeah. And I hope through what we saw in the exams, that this was kind of clear that IB is, and I think it came across in so many different ways. That first of all, exam stress is much less because. And I think IB goes through great pain to try to come up with a curriculum that does not require memorization. I think that really we have to give them credit.
I mean, very progressive.
Right.
Every time the e-assessment paper, even as an adult,
Yeah.
I love taking it because
Right.
it's so challenging and it's fun.
Yeah.
And you don't need to prepare and give that paper, right? You can
Right.
think, analyze with some knowledge. You can actually go for it,
Yeah.
That's what. DP, I'm not, I won't say that they're that progressive there.
Right.
But MYP is a great program.
Right.
Yeah.
And even with DP, while of course, it's a bit more paper pen, traditional, they really go through a lot of effort, because it makes it hard for them, right? To come up with questions where it's not simple.
It's not at
Where you have to think a lot, where, I'm not testing your memory. So, but they do it every single time. And, really from all the subjects that we saw, no memorization practically. In biology, we had, someone say that a little bit of, like you can't do without memorization. But I think apart from that, really no memorization at all. And I think in IGCSE, definitely in history, geography, I guess even in physics, definitely a lot of content focus, a lot of memorization. So, and related point, it becomes more fun,
It is.
because
Yeah.
you're not reading the same content again and again and again and again just to make sure that you know it well. You're never having to do that in IB.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, the content then is much more vast, but then you don't need to know all of it. You just need to have practiced the skills and built the skills over your time. And you can just sort of, show up for the exam and you will be fine.